Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Rams Review podcast. We've got a preview for the, the traditional Boxing Day fixture as the Rams go to St Andrews to take on Birmingham City. And seeing as we want to talk Birmingham City and maybe a little bit wider championship as well, who else am I going to get on other than Gab Sutton, who is here to join me again? Gab, mate, how are you? It's been a while since we spoke on the podcast, but how have you
Yeah,
found
yeah,
the season?
it's great to be on. I feel like I have you on quite often on EFL debates. I always look forward to returning the favour. Yeah, it does feel like a common thing. Birmingham City against Derby County on Boxing Day. We often seem to play you around this time of year, don't we? I seem to remember you beat us 4-0 in 2014 on Boxing Day. So hopefully we can avoid a repeat of that.
Yeah, and there was also the day where Christian Bielik looked like he was back better than ever, and hmm, that worked out well, didn't it? But yeah, no. So there's been a bit of history down the years. Obviously, Birmingham back in the second tier after promotion, and there's the added bit of spice, of course, that John Eustace is returning there for. I think it's his first time since his departure, is it not? Since they dismissed him.
I don't actually know whether it's his absolute first time because he has been about a bit in Championship management since then, hasn't he? Not 100% sure on that, but I mean, I'm kind of curious to know from a Derby fan's point of view, Jack, like what you think of Birmingham City because obviously you have that kind of East Midlands circulation, certainly with Nottingham Forest and a bit of semi-banter, I suppose, with Leicester City. Do you have any strong feelings either way on Birmingham City as a fan base, or are you just pretty neutral?
I don't. To be fair, I'm uh, quite neutral on all of these things because you have to train yourself to be a little bit, don't you? I mean,
Yeah,
whether
sure.
whether that lasts when we play Leeds in the FA Cup in a couple of weeks is going to be a different matter. We will find out whether they let me back in after that one. We'll be able to tell you just how trained I am. But no, I mean, I think for me, it's just it's another proper club who deserve to be back in the second tier with now lofty ambitions to go further. And I think I look at it and see a really interesting project, to be honest. So I'm
Mm,
curious as to how you feel your first half of the season's gone compared to expectations because you're what 2 points behind Derby, 14th.
sure. Yeah, it's been a really interesting first half of the season for us. I think for us as a fan base, if there was no discourse from the ownership in terms of, yeah, we want to get promoted and we want to do this, that, and the other, which has really sort of poured fire on the fuel, if you like, or fueled the fire for Birmingham City fans in terms of ambitions this season. I don't know how much of it is come. I think there's a lot of belief already based on what we saw last season, smashing the Football League points record in League One with 111. So obviously, we came into the division with a lot of confidence, but maybe it was kind of egged on further because Tom Wagner, our owner, made no attempt to sort of play that down. And so we have come into the season sort of expecting to be up and around there. And the fact that we've been amazing at home, which has been wonderful to see. I suppose the fact that we've had that difficulty away from home and learning how to impose ourselves outside St Andrews, that's kind of dragged our position down a little bit and put us right, into that playoff pack of lots of teams extending down into the bottom half. Yeah, there's a little bit of frustration there, but I think that's partly just because of how much the ownership have raised the expectations of the fan base, which had been low for a long time.
Yes, indeed. I mean, it's interesting because if you look at recent form since the November international break, Birmingham, like Derby, I think it's 2 wins in the last seven, based on my very quick maths before stepping in to do this. Um, but but yeah, it's been a bit of a disappointing run of late with what no wins in four. How do you think they kind of react to that? Is this a big game? Because obviously
Hmm,
for Birmingham, as you say, good home record. Derby much better on the
sure.
road at the moment as well. Interestingly,
Hmm,
so
yeah.
I think it's setting up to be fascinating.
Yeah, certainly is. I think there's a very weird feeling that Blues fans are experiencing right now, which is when we're at St Andrews, we're able to really impose ourselves on games, and we're really aggressive. We've got Marvin Deutsch, who's made a big impact since coming into the team, alongside Jay Stansfield, and they've been aggressive from the front, and they've been supported out wide by Damari Gray and Patrick Roberts, who have brought a lot of flair and guile from wide positions. You've got Tomoki Iwata doing a really good job in that sort of inverted right back role, which has been different from last season. You got Paik Sung Ho and Tommy Doyle, who's been excellent in central midfield. So all those things in mind, we're really aggressive at home and we impose ourselves. And yet when we go away from home, it's quite frustrating because we face teams. I was at QPR a couple of weeks ago, and I'm pretty sure, with respect to QPR, who are making a lot of progress themselves, I think if we were playing at them at St Andrews, I think we'd do to them what we did to Millwall, what we did to Norwich, what we've done to plenty of other teams. But for some reason, because it's away from home, we found it harder to get up the pitch for those two strikers to go and engage, for the team to be as aggressive, and that's quite frustrating because you know that that team can do it, and yeah, away from home, we've just not worked out how to impose ourselves. So, real encouragement, real excitement about this chapter of the football club. One of the most exciting periods to support the club in the modern era. I love what the job that Chris Davies has done, but just it's sort of tinted with a little bit of frustration because we know there's more to come from us away from home.
Yeah, with that and with everything that's been said about the ownership, and of course the history with managers, and John Eustace's departure in such a strong position, is there any pressure on him, Chris Davies, or is he being given time?
I hope he's given a lot of time. I think he's done a brilliant job. I don't actually know if the summer recruitment was everything it could have been, because I think if we look at the profiles that we recruited from, a lot of them are contact based. So we've gone for people who Chris Davies has worked with, who Craig Gardner, technical director or director of football, has worked with, and that's very much been the way we've gone about things. And sometimes you're kind of questioning whether, have we been as scientific as we could have been? Because we did find some good value in different markets last summer before in 2024. Yeah, I think there's possibly a question mark over whether Craig Gardner's the best person we could have in that director of football role. So for me, the other thing I would say, Chris Davies is a very driven guy. He's the kind of person who, when he walks into the room, he carries himself with a bit of authority as well. So I really like him. I think he's brought a different level of ambition to the football club. I think he can change the mentality of the club as well to a certain extent. I'm absolutely all in on Chris Davies. I think he's done a brilliant job for us. I can see why there's a bit of frustration with the away performances, and I think he's certainly got to get that right. But personally, I'm all behind him.
Yeah, I mean it's going to be tactically interesting because of what you were talking about there with the home performances and wanting to dominate, and Derby on the flip side, as I said before, being much better away from home, happy to sit off a lot of the time, not necessarily overly engage, which I know has been a big frustration at home. And that counter-attacking style where they look more comfortable without the ball is what's bringing Derby success right now. So I think we might see a game, and comment on this in a second, but I think we might see a game where both sides are relatively comfortable with their roles. How do you think Birmingham deal with a side who seem to be better without the ball at the moment?
Yeah, well, that's one thing I did want to ask you about, Jack, because when I look at the Derby lineups, it's a bit of a striker overload, isn't it? You've got like Carlton Morris, Patrick Agyemang, and Ben Brereton Diaz all in the same front three. And I'm sort of almost surprised because you almost conventionally think that there'd only be two of them. And I suppose I'd wonder, I can kind of see why it works with less possession because you can't really dominate midfields, I wouldn't have thought, when you've got three strikers because you've maybe naturally just got fewer numbers further back on the pitch. So I'm curious to hear how you feel that formation and system has worked for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think since Carlton Morris's injury, Derby is still trying to find any shred of consistency. That
Mm.
was the moment where you thought this could derail the season. I mean, to give you an idea how big a story that was, I was sat for the next 5, 10 minutes watching him on the sidelines and watching body language of the coaches, not the game, because that in that moment was the thing that I knew fans would want reporting on. Um,
Mm.
I think realistically, what we've seen is a squad that's been built to have a senior player with a less experienced player to come through behind them. So Patrick Adjumang is perhaps that for Carlton Morris, but what we've then found is that he's perhaps more effective as a wide outlet, using his power and his pace,
Mm.
even if he is raw with a inconsistent first touch, let's say, um, to drag Derby up the pitch. Ben Burton Diaz has struggled for form, struggled for minutes,
Mm.
looked a bit better and worked harder in central areas, granted. But we have then seen a shift to maybe try and control at midfield a little bit more at home, where an Andy Vyman or a Ryan Brewster sometimes leads the press and then drops off completely into a midfield three, as John Eustace is talking about it. I mean, I asked him to confirm this the other week, and he is now describing it as a midfield three and a front two rather than a midfield two
Right.
and a front three. So there is
Okay.
a shift there to try and dominate. Bobby Clark has been a bit of a revelation in the middle of the park. Found some kind of off the ball abilities that we maybe didn't think he had as a attacking midfielder or winger. But I do think there will be an incoming there in January. So it's something they're looking to do
Mm.
away from home. Is not necessarily that much of an issue. I think back to games like Ipswich all the way back in August, Lewis Travis's debut. Him and Evo Adams were in there, and they were just trying to break up play and just keep repelling Ipswich. West Brom away was similar as well. Derby had, I think, 9 touches in the opposition box, and 5 of them came for Andy Vyman's goal. So they are set up to do this.
Mm.
And for the record, Gav, I have only slotted that in case Chris Hall watches this. Uh, but um, but no, I think yeah, it's definitely something they're looking to do more. John Eustace said he wants to play more, wants them to have more of the ball, but every time they try to, they seem to come a little bit unstuck. So I would anticipate Birmingham maybe being in control and Derby looking to pick them off when an opportunity
Yeah.
arises.
I agree. I could see that. I think from our point of view, Tommy Doyle, although he's a short lad, he does bring a lot of drive to our midfield, and he's not afraid to kind of try and power forward. And he can be a real threat. And then we've got what gives us a lot of flexibility as well, Jack, is that Tomoki Iwata did a brilliant job as a number 6 for us last season. Yeah, popping the player over, ticking it over at the base of midfield. And but because of issues that we've had at right back with one thing and another, Chris Davies has actually moved Iwata to right back, and there he's kind of done a job where he can play as a conventional right back, but he can also invert into midfield, and sometimes there's even been times where he's popped up in unusual goal scoring areas, and it can kind of wrong foot opponents. So Tomoki Iwata is definitely one to watch, and it does give freedom to somebody like Tommy Doyle to sort of power on because he knows that there's the right backs coming up behind. And then what we do when we're at our best is we've got Alex Cochrane at left back, but I don't know whether he's going to be available for Boxing Day because at times recently we've played Jack Robinson at left back, and Robinson struggled in recent games, so that could be an area of weakness for us.
Yeah, I mean, I should mention in terms of team news, anyone who's listened to the review podcast this week, I think I mentioned it there, that Lewis Travis and Max Johnston are back in training for Derby as of last Friday. The game, according to John Eustace, might come a bit too soon for them, but that is 2 of 4 probable starters, as he described it, alongside Ozo and Morris, who have been out, who might be back. So there's a little bit of a silver lining, a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel there. I I do think though Max Johnston might struggle to get back in the team with Joe Ward at the moment because he's been a
Mm.
revelation with his
Yeah.
form. How do you think Birmingham? If you talk about left back there, how do you think they will deal with someone like him who has become such a good creator of late?
I'm sort of quite surprised at how good Joe Ward has been because I've always had him in my head as being, a pretty reliable League One player, someone who can play anywhere across the side, could probably do a job on either side as well. Pretty dependable, good work ethic, might be good for a few cutbacks, but not someone who would be much to write home again. And yet he's been one of the most creative players statistically in the Championship this season. So, I mean, in terms of how to deal with, I mean, you wouldn't say Joe Ward is particularly quick or direct, would you, as such? So, I suppose it's just a case of keeping an eye on him and making sure that yeah, we've got that support on that flank. We've got Murray Gray just ahead of Alex Cochrane. But I imagine, yeah, Chris Davies will be asking Cochrane to be pretty aggressive against Ward and back himself to win that duel. But clearly, is somebody we've got to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I guess the other thing comes back to aerial ability in the box to repel any good deliveries, because that is what
Mm,
has been so impressive, particularly from
yeah.
corners and so on. Some really unorthodox set pieces from Matt Gardner, who's in charge of those, who I termed air traffic control the other week for the way he's coordinating this so well. But but yeah, I mean, I think what you say there about him is really interesting, because I think many Derby fans have the same thing. I think I mean, there was so much talk that he was going to go on deadline day, that
Mm.
Kane Wilson went to MK Dons, and he's played his way into the team when the opportunity arises. So it has. It's been interesting. I want to ask you a little bit about Kyogo Furuhashi as well, because he was one of the kind of most
Yes.
attention-grabbing signings, and someone that,
Mm.
with my kind of Scottish football allegiances, I've been burnt by before. Let's just say,
Yeah.
how's he getting on?
So, I think there was a lot of excitement when Kyogo signed because of his goal scoring record. Particularly for Celtic, because he didn't have the best time of things in France. But one thing I was to give myself a little bit of credit, one thing I was slightly cautious about when he first signed was that where at the beginning of the summer, what we thought we'd need to profile if we were going to sign another striker, rather than absolutely back Jay Stansfield to be our out and out number 9, um, is would probably need a target man, because last season when Jay Stansfield scored, he scored 10 open play goals, and 7 of them were either when Lyndon Dykes and Lukas Jukovic were on the pitch, and Jukovic has since been released and or retired. And Dykes was only expecting to be a kind of plan B this season, which is how it's panned out. And so I was kind of concerned about, well, if we're signing for a Hashi, who's going to be that physical presence that allows Jay Stansfield and frees him up to poach and wins the physical duels and the headers and the knockdowns, and allows Stansfield to face goal rather than have his back to goal, because Stano's back to goal play isn't actually that great. And that's kind of been how it's played out, because for Hashi, they've had some moments where he's linked up quite nicely with Stansfield with the ball on the deck, but it's difficult to really get the better of defences because neither of them have that physical presence. Whereas Marvin Deutsch had an injury affected start to his St Andrews career, but since he came into the team around October time, it's made a huge difference to Jay Stansfield, and those two have established a really nice combination, especially at home. And again, I think for that reason that Deutsch can be that target man presence. And that kind of feeds into the dilemma that Furahashi's had now. I still feel like in the latter stages of games, there's times where Farashi and Stano can link up quite nicely, because they do have the makings of a good understanding, and sometimes there's some good one-touch play, and when the game's open, there's chances created for Furuhashi. But another problem, as well as, it's one thing him not having the physicality to bring the best out of Stansfield, but also when Furuhashi has had those chances, he's not being clinical. And so that's been the issue. So he's yeah, he's struggled to sort of complement Stansfield, and also he struggled to score goals himself. So unfortunately, it's been a tough first half of the season for him.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at Opta here, predictably. On the expected table, based on expected goals for and against and expected points, Birmingham are fourth. Is that, kind of, have they underperformed compared to the way they've been playing in games, just to put it bluntly, or is that a kind of misrepresentation?
Yeah, I think there's some validity to that. I think there's an argument that we've been a little bit unlucky in some games, and there's probably other games where it's felt like we we haven't imposed ourselves well enough. And I think we have to take some accountability for that. But I'm just going to look at what the expected goals for and against is for us away from home, because on expected goals for, we're sort of 15th most. And if I have a look at against, we've got the ninth best. So we're sort of about mid-table away from home. So I imagine that the issue we've had is our expected goals for and against performance at home is pretty nicely aligned, and the stats bear that up. There's not a big difference in terms of our XG performance, but away from home we've possibly deserved a little bit more, but we still have to take some ownership of that, because I think we're capable of better.
Yeah, so again, it's something where at home and with what Derby are going to face on Boxing Day, they will probably be about proportionate then, and
Yeah.
we should expect a strong Birmingham side. Is the impression I'm getting.
Absolutely, yeah. But there's one dilemma that I do think's worth bringing up, though, Jack, which is Phil Newman, or Neumann, as I believe it's actually pronounced, and Christoph Clara. Individually, they're having good seasons, but I would possibly question them as a pairing, because they're both right-footed, which means Christoph Clara has to play as our left centre half. And the challenge with that is that when last season he was playing on the right of a centre back pairing, and actually because our right back pushed very high up the pitch, our left back Alex Cochrane tucked in, so he's kind of the right of back three, which suited him because it allowed him to play those diagonals, and it helped him a lot in possession. The problem that he has in the Championship is that because we've signed Phil Neumann, who's gone in on the right, it's meant Clara's gone over to the left. And you know how centre halves on their unnatural side, they can somehow get cornered or a little bit snookered, and it becomes a little bit harder or a bit more awkward for them in possession. I think we've seen elements of that with Christoph Clara. So I do feel like, although I'm absolutely delighted with having Neumann and having Clara, Clara's been, one of the best centre halves I've seen actually in the Championship, because he's so aggressive. So he scored a lovely looping header against Charlton. No nonsense in the way that he's happy to go for a challenge, but also so cultured on the ball and has amazing vision for a centre half. So brilliant Rolls Royce for a defender, but just I'd rather have him on his natural side. So that's the dilemma that we have with Christoph Clara. I think we might be in the market for a left-footed defender in January, possibly. Maybe someone who could cover left back as well. But in the meantime, I do wonder if that's an area where with the right sort of pressing trap might be able to catch Clara out, because I do think that issue can be a bit awkward for us in early build-up.
Yeah, and this of course comes with a little bit of a defensive dilemma for Derby as well, with Dion Sanderson ineligible. So whether we see them shift to the back four or Curtis Nelson comes in is one of the points we've based on this week's podcast. I mean, I do think Sondre Langas certainly has the pace for right back. That could work if Johnston's fit and Eustace wants to get both him and Ward in. You could make it work, although I'd say they're both wing backs really, or Ward could play further forward, but I'd question Johnston as a fullback with all I've seen of him in various Scotland teams over the years as well. So yeah, there's definitely room for some kind of defensive lapses and some little issues that could create the odd opportunity on Friday. Just quickly, Gab, what sort of reception do you expect John Eustace to get? Because obviously, as I say, it's a big talking point from that game that we've got some good lines on. So that's all going to go into my piece on Friday that you'll be able to get on the website. Yes, I am just shamelessly plugging stuff, but what do you think the kind of reaction and the sentiment is from Birmingham fans?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of appreciation for John Eustace. I think he's a very down-to-earth bloke, isn't he? I think you can possibly speak to that, Jack, from your press conferences, where some managers, because I've had this as a journalist, I don't know about you, Jack, Some managers, they'll speak to club media, they'll speak to maybe Sky Sports, BBC, the local BBC radio, all that kind of stuff. But then when it comes to like the extra journalists, it's like, oh God, we've got to speak to the. Whereas I always get the impression with John Eustace that he's a very down to earth guy and he's happy to speak to people. And I think that makes a difference, doesn't it, to creating a nice environment. I think he's like that with the fans. I think he's like that with the players. So he's very down to earth, as I mentioned, very humble, and creates a real togetherness in the clubs that he manages. So I think that's a real strength of his. Um, and for that reason, I think he's greatly appreciated. I think it set us back quite a bit, not sticking with us with him, because I do wonder with our resources what John Eustace, who I think is a top six championship manager, could have done. I think there's a lot of excitement around that. So I think that he's the one that got away for us. But I'm sure we wish him well, and I'm sure he'll get a great reception.
Yes, and finally, Gav, just to look a little bit more broadly, anything to look out for across the Championship and EFL, across all these festive fixtures?
Well, I'm fascinated to see how whether Coventry can continue to pull clear. Really looking forward to seeing how Wrexham and Sheffield United goes, whether the Blades can continue their surge up the table. Oxford, how they're going to perform under interim management. Really impressed with Kim Hellberg at Middlesbrough. Can he continue to impress? Lots that I'm excited about over on Boxing Day.
Excellent. Yeah, I mean, it should be a great day of football, and the benefit for Birmingham and Derby fans is with the 12:30 kickoff, we can then catch some later games as well, whether we're pleased or not with how the lunchtime action has gone. So yeah, I mean, it promises to be a feast of football. I'm sure you will be very busy. I will be very busy, and yeah. So all that remains, Gav, where can people find you if they want to kind of follow along to your reaction to all of this?
So you can drop me a follow on Twitter at Gab Sutton, and you can also get subscribed to my podcast which is called EFL Debate, which is available on YouTube and on Spotify. So Gab Sutton on Twitter, YouTube or Spotify, EFL Debate.
Excellent. I'm sure we will catch up before long, Gav. But for now, have a great Christmas, mate.
Thank you. You too.
And to you watching and listening as well, Merry Christmas, and all that's left to say is up the rounds.